Hello guys, welcome to Storytimes. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise, even more interesting stories. So let's get started this story. They say a man's home is his castle, but I never understood what that really meant until the day I came home early and found another man's DNA in my bedroom trash can. My name is Robert Brennan. I'm 52 years old. And I'm about to tell you how I destroyed my cheating wife's life so completely that 6 months later, she's still picking up the pieces. This isn't a story about forgiveness or second chances. This is about what happens when a woman betrays the wrong man. A man who spent 30 years building something she thought she could tear down in an afternoon. She was wrong, dead wrong. And by the time I was finished with her, everyone in our small town knew exactly what kind of woman Carol Brennan really was. My name is Robert Brennan, and I'm 52 years old. I'm sitting in the house I built with my own hands 30 years ago, and until last Tuesday, I thought I knew everything about my life. I thought I understood the deal I'd made, the woman I'd married, and the future we were building together. I was wrong about all of it. Carol and I met when I was 24 and she was 22. I was working construction then, learning the electrical trade from an old-timer named Frank Kowalski, who taught me that a man's reputation is built one job at a time, one wire at a time, one satisfied customer at a time. Carol was waiting tables at a diner on Route 9, saving money for community college. She had this laugh that could fill a room in a way of making everyone feel like they mattered. We fell hard and fast, 6 months of dating that felt like 6 years. I proposed on a Friday night in her tiny apartment, getting down on one knee next to her second-hand couch with a ring I'd saved 3 months to buy. "Will you marry me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Yes," she replied before I'd even finished the question, tears streaming down her face. We married 4 months later in a small ceremony at St. Mary's. Honeymooned in the Smoky Mountains, because it was all we could afford, and started building what I believed would be our forever. Those early years were lean, but good. I was working 70-hour weeks, taking every job I could get, slowly building my client base. Carol stayed home after Jake was born. That was her choice, her dream. She wanted to be the mother who was always there, who made homemade cookies and helped with homework and knew all the other parents at school events. I made it possible. I worked longer, harder, took jobs other contractors wouldn't touch. Also, she could have the life she wanted. Tyler came along 2 years later, and our family felt complete. I remember Carol holding him in the hospital, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "We did good, Bobby," she whispered. "We did real good." I agreed completely. I got the vasectomy 6 months later. We both agreed 2 kids were enough, and we were done taking chances. I built this house piece by piece, ran every wire myself, installed every outlet, every switch, every fixture. The kitchen table where we ate dinner every night for 24 years. I made it in my garage. The deck where we watched the boys learn to ride bikes. I built it on weekends. The garden where Carol grew tomatoes and herbs. I tilled that soil with my own hands. Jake's 26 now, a software engineer with his own apartment downtown. Good job, good head on his shoulders, visits every other Sunday for dinner. Tyler's 24, a paramedic living across town with his girlfriend Sarah. Both boys turned out right, which is more than a lot of parents can say these days. The business grew steady over the years. Brennan Electric went from just me and a beat-up truck to 8 employees and a reputation for quality work. I still get my hands dirty, still crawl through attics and wire panels, but I've got good people working for me now. Men I trust, men who understand that our name is on every job we touch. Carol's life got easier as the boys grew up. She started taking yoga classes, meeting friends for coffee, reading those book club novels that all seemed to be about women finding themselves. I was happy for her. She'd earned it, spending all those years focused on the boys and the house. She deserved time for herself. Last month, she mentioned maybe taking an art class at the community center. "Go for it." I told her, "Money's not tight anymore. You should pursue whatever makes you happy." I thought we were entering the best years of our marriage. Kids launched, business stable, time to enjoy what we'd built together. Tuesday started like any other day. I was finishing up a panel upgrade at a medical office, routine work that should have taken until 5. But the job went smooth, and I wrapped up by 3:30. I drove home planning to shower off the day's sweat and maybe watch some baseball. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Carol's car was there, but I figured she was napping or reading. I wish I'd stayed at that job site. I wish I'd never gone home early. Because some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. Some betrayals cut so deep, they change who you are forever. The trash bin beside our bed held something that shouldn't exist in my world. Something that proved my wife had invited a stranger into the house I built. Into the bed I paid for while I was out breaking my back to provide for her. I pulled off my work boots at the front door like I always did, not wanting to track dirt through the house. The silence felt different that day, though I couldn't say why. Usually Carol would call out when she heard me come in, but the house was dead quiet. I figured she was taking one of her afternoon naps. I walked through the living room, past the couch where we'd watched 1,000 movies, past the family photos lining the mantel. Our wedding picture smiled down at me. Two young kids who thought they had forever figured out. I was heading for the bathroom to wash up when something caught my eye in the bedroom, the trash bin beside our bed. Something white at the bottom. I almost walked past it, almost minded my own business. But something made me look closer, and when I did, my world ended. A used condom. Tied off and discarded like yesterday's garbage, my legs went weak. The room started spinning. I grabbed the dresser to keep from falling, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. My mind raced through the impossibility of what I was seeing. We hadn't used condoms in over 20 years, not since my vasectomy. There was only one explanation for what was in that trash can. Someone else had been in my bed. The rage hit me like a physical force. I wanted to scream, to put my fist through the wall, to tear the house apart board by board. I wanted to wait for Carol to come home and demand answers, to make her explain the unexplainable. But even through the fury, a colder thought cut through the noise. If I confronted her without proof, she'd deny everything. She'd claim I was paranoid, that I was seeing things that weren't there. She might even convince me I was wrong, gaslight me into questioning my own eyes. And if this was what I thought it was, if she really was cheating, then charging in blind would be the stupidest thing I could do. In a divorce, emotions don't matter. The court doesn't care about broken hearts or betrayed trust. It cares about evidence, documentation, proof. Without concrete evidence of her affair, she'd walk away with half of everything I'd built. Half my business, half my savings, half my retirement. The house would be sold. The life I'd created divided up and distributed like spoils of war. I forced myself to back away from the trash can, to leave everything exactly as I'd found it. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed Dave Martin's number. Dave lived 3 houses down, retired IT guy who'd helped me set up the computer system for my business. If anyone could help me get the proof I needed, it was Dave. "Dave, it's Robert," I said when he answered. "I need a favor, and I can't explain everything over the phone. Can you come over?" He must have heard something in my voice because he didn't ask questions. "Give me 30 minutes, he replied immediately. I spent those 30 minutes pacing my house like a caged animal, seeing betrayal in every corner. The kitchen where she'd kissed me goodbye that morning. The living room where we'd watched TV the night before. How long had this been going on? How many times had she brought him here while I was working? How many times had she lied to my face? Dave arrived with a small duffel bag and the kind of professional focus that comes from 30 years in corporate IT. I told him I suspected Carol was cheating and that I needed surveillance equipment. He didn't judge, didn't ask for details. He just nodded and got to work. We spent 2 hours installing hidden cameras throughout the house. Motion-activated streaming to cloud storage and my phone. Living room, hallway, bedroom, front entry, small enough to be invisible, sophisticated enough to capture everything in high definition. They'll record automatically, Dave explained as he showed me the phone app. Motion alerts will come straight to your phone. Everything uploads to secure cloud storage, so even if something happens to your phone, you'll have backup copies. I thanked him and he left, no questions asked. That's the kind of neighbor Dave was, solid, dependable. The kind of man who understood that sometimes you need help without having to explain why. The next 2 days were the worst of my life. Coming home to Carol cooking dinner, kissing me on the cheek like nothing had changed, asking about my day while my stomach churned with the knowledge of what she'd done. I played the devoted husband while dying inside, checking my phone constantly, waiting for the motion alerts that would confirm my worst fears. Thursday morning, I was on a job site rewiring an office building when my phone buzzed, motion detected, front door camera. I opened the app with shaking hands, switched to live view, and watched a man I'd never seen before walk through my front door like he owned the place. Carol greeted him with a kiss that told me everything I needed to know. I was watching my marriage end in real time. Kyle Turner, that was his name, though I didn't know it yet. Mid-20s, arrogant grin, expensive sneakers that probably cost more than most people made in a week. He strutted through my front door like he belonged there, like he'd been invited into the most sacred space in my world. I watched them on my phone screen, unable to look away even though every second was torture. Carol wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled him close, kissed him with a passion I hadn't seen from her in years. They whispered to each other, laughed at private jokes, touched each other with the casual intimacy of people who'd done this before. Many times before, this wasn't some moment of weakness or a one-time mistake. This was a relationship. They moved toward the stairs, and I knew where they were going. The bedroom camera would activate soon, and I'd have to watch my wife betray 26 years of marriage in the bed where we'd conceived our children, where we'd held each other through bad dreams and good news, where I'd promised to love her until death do us part. I stood up from the electrical panel I was working on, my tools forgotten. My foreman, Tony, looked over at me with concern. "You okay, Robert?" he asked, noticing my pale face. "Family emergency," I answered, my voice hollow. "I have to leave." He nodded immediately, concern in his eyes. "Go, we'll handle things here." Tony had worked for me for 8 years. He'd never seen me leave a job unfinished. I walked to my truck in a daze, propped my phone on the dashboard, and started driving home. The bedroom camera had activated. Carol and Kyle were undressing each other, falling onto the bed I'd assembled myself 15 years ago. I watched my wife's hands explore another man's body, watched her arch her back as he touched her, watched her become someone I didn't recognize. The drive home was surreal. Stop signs, traffic lights, suburban streets where neighbors walked their dogs and kids rode bicycles, all while I watched my marriage disintegrate on a 6-inch screen. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was operating on pure instinct. Some primal part of my brain that understood only territory and violation and the need to defend what was mine. I pulled into my driveway and parked quietly. The sounds from inside the house reached me before I'd even opened my front door. Moaning, laughter, the rhythmic creak of bed springs that had supported my sleep for 15 years. I climbed the stairs slowly, stepping over Kyle's shirt, Carol's jeans, underwear scattered like evidence of her betrayal. I paused outside the bedroom door, listening to my wife make sounds she'd never made for me. Then I kicked the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. The scream that came from Carol was pure terror. Kyle scrambled to cover himself, his face draining of color as he saw me standing in the doorway. For a moment, nobody moved. We were frozen in this tableau of betrayal and discovery, like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Then something cold and violent took over. I crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed Kyle by the throat, and threw him off my bed. He hit the floor hard, gasping for air. I drove my fist into his jaw with 30 years of construction work behind it. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, blood spraying from his mouth. "Stop," Carol screamed, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. "Bobby, please stop." Kyle tried to get up, tried to speak through the blood. "I'm sorry, man," he gasped. "I didn't know. I didn't want explanations. I wanted him to understand that there are consequences for touching another man's wife in his own bed." I drove my knee into his ribs repeatedly, feeling them crack under the impact. Kyle's begging turned to sobbing, but I wasn't done. I kicked him in the groin with the steel-toed work boot I was still wearing. A devastating blow that dropped him to the floor. Screaming, "Get out of my house before I kill you," I said, my voice dead calm. Kyle crawled toward the door, leaving a trail of blood on the hardwood floors I'd installed myself. He tumbled down the stairs, dragged himself across the living room, and collapsed on my front lawn. I watched from the doorway as he pulled himself into his car and sped away, probably heading for the emergency room. I turned back to Carol. She was wrapped in our bed sheet, sobbing, mascara streaming down her face. She looked small and pathetic and nothing like the woman I'd married. "Get dressed," I told her. "Bobby, please," she tried to speak, to explain, to make excuses. "Let me explain. This isn't, get dressed," I repeated, cutting her off. She obeyed. 5 minutes later, she appeared at the top of the stairs, fully clothed but still shaking. She tried to talk again. "Bobby, I'm sorry," she pleaded. "It didn't mean anything. We can work through this." We can go to counseling. I opened the front door. Leave, I commanded. Please, where am I supposed to go? She asked desperately. I don't care, I replied coldly. She collapsed on the front step, crying harder. I closed the door in her face and locked it. Then I pulled out my phone. The cameras had recorded everything, her betrayal, my response, every second of the destruction of our marriage. Now it was time to make sure she never recovered from this. I sat in my living room, surrounded by silence for the first time in hours, and made the calls that would reshape the rest of our lives. First, I called Jake, then added Tyler to the line. They deserved to hear this from me before Carol tried to spin her version of events. Boys, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear. I began, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Your mother's been cheating on me. I caught her in our bed with another man today. I'm filing for divorce. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Jake's voice came through, tight with controlled anger. Dad, are you okay? He asked. Do you need us to come over? I'm okay, I answered. I will be okay. I just wanted you to know the truth before she tries to contact you. Tyler's voice was rougher when he spoke. What do you mean you caught her? I have video evidence, I explained. Everything recorded. I'm not asking you boys to choose sides, but I want you to know what really happened. We're with you, Dad, Jake said immediately. Whatever you need. Always, Tyler echoed, his voice firm. I thanked them, told them I loved them, and hung up before the emotion could crack my voice. Then I made the call that would determine Carol's future. Margaret Sinclair was the divorce attorney my business accountant had recommended years ago during a casual conversation about asset protection. She agreed to see me first thing the next morning. Margaret's office was all dark wood and law books, the kind of place that communicated competence and discretion. I handed her a USB drive containing the camera footage, and she watched it in silence. The video was comprehensive, Carol and Kyle entering the house, kissing, undressing, the bedroom footage that documented their affair in explicit detail. Margaret's expression remained professional throughout, but I saw the disgust flicker in her eyes when Kyle appeared on screen. This is ironclad, she said when the video ended. Adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. With this evidence, you'll retain all marital assets, the house, business, savings, retirement accounts. She'll get minimal support, if any. The court doesn't reward infidelity. File immediately, I told her. I want her served by the end of the week. Understood, she replied, already making notes. We'll move fast. Margaret explained the process. Temporary restraining order preventing Carol from returning to the house. Freezing of joint accounts. Expedited hearing given the clear evidence of adultery. I listened to every word, feeling the satisfaction settle deeper in my chest with each legal maneuver that would protect what I'd built. While I was planning Carol's legal destruction, she was discovering the personal cost of her betrayal. She tried calling Jake repeatedly. He ignored her for 2 days before finally responding via text. You destroyed our family. Don't contact us again. Tyler was even more direct. He blocked her number entirely. When she showed up at his apartment, he didn't answer the door. She stood outside for an hour, knocking and pleading, while neighbors watched through their windows. The woman who'd raised him, who'd bandaged his scraped knees and cheered at his baseball games, had become a stranger, begging for attention he would never give again. The next 60 days were a blur of depositions, financial disclosures, and mediation sessions that Carol's attorney insisted on, despite having absolutely no leverage. Carol tried every defense in the book during her deposition. I felt neglected, she claimed, dabbing her eyes with tissue. Robert worked all the time. I needed companionship. Did that give you the right to commit adultery in the marital home? Margaret asked coldly. I was having a midlife crisis, Carol continued. I needed to find myself. In another man's bed, Margaret replied without missing a beat. Margaret shut down each pathetic excuse with the video evidence and testimony about my faithful provision for the family. I learned that Kyle Turner had spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Broken ribs, internal injuries, permanent damage to his groin that the doctor said would affect him for the rest of his life. His lawyer advised him not to press charges, given the circumstances of how he was discovered. A jury would be unsympathetic to a man caught in another man's bed. Kyle left town the day he was discharged from the hospital, probably terrified I'd come back to finish what I'd started. Good. Let him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, remembering what happens when you touch something that doesn't belong to you. The judge reviewed everything and ruled swiftly. I retained the house, the business, all savings and retirement accounts. Carol received a settlement of exactly $2,000, just enough to avoid claims of punitive damages and no alimony. 26 years of marriage dissolved with the bang of a gavel. 60 days after I kicked down that bedroom door, Carol was legally erased from my life. She got $2,000 and a studio apartment on the wrong side of town. I got everything else, including my peace. The story spread through our community like wildfire, and Carol lit the match herself. She couldn't help but play the victim, complaining to anyone who would listen about her abusive husband who nearly killed an innocent man and threw her out with nothing. But the truth has a way of finding daylight, and this truth was too explosive to stay buried. Dave Martin, my neighbor who'd helped install the surveillance equipment, mentioned the video evidence to a few close friends. Word spread. Someone saw Kyle crawling out of my house naked and bleeding. Someone else witnessed Carol sobbing on my front lawn. The pieces came together quickly in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business. The community's response shocked me. Instead of judgment, I received respect. Other men at Angel's hardware store nodded knowingly when I walked in, shook my hand with genuine admiration. They'd heard what I'd done, and they approved. These were men who understood that some lines can't be crossed without consequences. My crew at work was fiercely loyal. They'd known Carol for years, had brought their wives to company barbecues, had watched her play the devoted wife and mother. They were disgusted by her betrayal. Tommy, one of my senior electricians, pulled me aside one day. My old man caught my mom cheating when I was 12, he confided. Didn't have the balls to do what you did? Lost everything in the divorce. I respect you for standing up for yourself. Thanks, Tommy, I replied, appreciating his honesty. I realized my reputation hadn't been damaged. It had been reinforced. I was seen as a man who defended his territory, who didn't tolerate disrespect, who responded with appropriate force when crossed. There was an old-fashioned masculinity to it that resonated with working-class men who'd built their lives with their hands and understood the value of what they'd created. Meanwhile, Carol's world crumbled piece by piece. She moved into a studio apartment in Riverside Gardens, the kind of complex where police sirens wail at all hours, and the parking lot is littered with broken glass. Peeling paint, thin walls, the smell of someone else's cooking always in the air. She took a job as a cashier at Dollar General, making $12 an hour, less than she used to spend on a single lunch with her book club friends. Those friends abandoned her one by one. The women who'd shared gossip and wine at monthly meetings suddenly had no time for the pariah who'd destroyed her family. Some felt she'd brought shame on all wives. Others simply didn't want the drama. The social circle she'd enjoyed as my wife closed ranks against her, leaving her isolated and alone. Carol made one final attempt to reach our sons, writing them a long letter explaining that she'd made a mistake, that she loved them, that she hoped they could forgive her someday. The letter was filled with self-pity and blame-shifting, painting herself as a confused woman who'd lost her way. Jake's response was brutal and final when he called her after receiving the letter. "You didn't just cheat on Dad," he told her coldly. "You betrayed all of us. You chose a stranger over your family. Don't contact us again." Tyler didn't respond at all. Kyle Turner's fate reached me through mutual acquaintances. The damage I'd inflicted was permanent. Chronic pain, expensive ongoing medical treatment, and injuries that would affect his intimate life forever. He'd left town immediately after being discharged from the hospital, terrified I might come back to finish what I'd started. Rumors said he moved 3 states away and tells people he was in a car accident. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kyle thought he was just having fun with a lonely housewife. He didn't realize he was touching something that belonged to a man who'd spent 30 years building and protecting everything he had. Now Kyle would spend the rest of his life remembering that mistake every time he tried to walk without pain. 6 months later, I sit on my back porch on a Saturday evening. And for the first time since that Tuesday, I feel something close to peace. It's a Saturday evening in late autumn, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I'm sitting on my back porch with a beer in my hand, watching the sun set over the yard I landscaped 20 years ago. The maple tree I planted when Jake was born has turned brilliant orange. The deck I built still holds my weight, still provides the perfect view of everything I've created. The house is quiet, but it's not lonely. Jake and Tyler are coming over for dinner, steaks on the grill, a tradition we've started since the divorce. They arrive every other Saturday now, like clockwork. We don't talk about Carol anymore. We don't need to. Life looks different now. I've redecorated the bedroom. New furniture, new paint, new everything. The cameras are still installed throughout the house, but I rarely check them. There's no one to catch anymore, no secrets to uncover. The house feels clean again, like it's truly mine for the first time in years. Business is thriving. Word spread about what happened, and instead of losing clients, I gain them. Other men want to hire someone strong, someone who doesn't back down when pushed. The respect I see in their eyes tells me everything I need to know about how the community views my response to betrayal. Jake arrives first, carrying craft beer and wearing the confident smile of a man who knows his father fought for their family's honor. Tyler pulls up 10 minutes later, still in his paramedic uniform, bringing dessert from the bakery Carol used to frequent. We embrace, solid masculine hugs that communicate everything without words. Over dinner, Jake raises his bottle. To moving forward, he says, meeting my eyes. It's become our family motto, not forgetting the past, but refusing to be trapped by it. We clink bottles, and I feel the satisfaction of a job well done. To moving forward, Tyler and I reply in unison. After they leave, I sit alone on the porch again. Sometimes I think about Carol, wonder if she's learned anything from the destruction she caused. But the thoughts are distant, abstract, like remembering a stranger. I think about Kyle, too, somewhere out there living with permanent consequences for temporary pleasure. I don't feel guilty, I feel justice. I look at my house, the one I wired, the floors I laid, the life I created from nothing. Carol tried to tear it down. Instead, she destroyed herself against its foundation. Some men rebuild after betrayal. I did something better. I made sure there was nothing left to rebuild from. And in the ruins of what she destroyed, I'm still standing in the house I built, stronger than before. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.